Welcome to Good Questions, Good Answer. Today, we have another interesting question from our audience, and Venerable Sander joining us again to solve the problem.
Yes,
And
thank you for
today,
having me on the program.
all right, thank you very much, Sander, for joining me. Today, many people have this anger and experience things in their life, but sometimes they are having this kind of questions in their mind. What is anger? And how does it cause? Because sometimes they anger without any reason. Sometimes they have an anger because of their emotion. So that's this brings to the question today: how to forgive and forget.
So we first have to ask ourselves, what is anger?
Mm.
It's pretty well known that in Buddhist psychology and meditation, anger is seen as a problem. But maybe we should go and talk about it a bit so we know why. So, first of all, anger in Buddhist texts is compared with a provoked snake. So when you are looking at a snake, it might not attack you yet, but if you are just provoking it a little, it will certainly attack with all its poison it has. It can be very quick and very unsuspected. Sometimes when we are angry, we do so very quickly and very unexpectedly. It's almost like we didn't see it coming. It's very often like that, in fact.
Mm.
Anger can spread like poison. There can be many good things we think, but we do not say them because we're angry. And all the bad things that we once thought about, we might say when we're angry, even though we don't really mean them. In other words, it spreads like poison because it causes all our good qualities that we have to become less, and all bad qualities that we might have to become bigger in ourselves.
Mm.
You could also say it's like a forest fire in that it burns its own support. Fire must have wood to arise. The same way, anger is of a nature that it will destroy its owner. So this is something to think about. We might think that our anger is helping us to be more direct, is helping us to fight for our rights. That is all true. That may be true at some times, but don't forget this anger which we have inside is also destroying us.
Yes. And
And
eventually it's come back to us.
it's kind of difficult, It sometimes it fools you. It's just like a medicine mixed with poison. In the same way, when we are angry, we often think our anger is justified. We almost always think so, because it's the very nature of anger to think that we are justified. But in fact, anger rarely accomplishes anything. Our anger might help us to be more active, but eventually we could have solved the problem much better if we had wisdom and calm.
Since you mentioned what is the anger, how about we should also clarify a little bit what type of anger do we have? So that's way we can see each situation how can be solved and handled appropriately.
Yeah, so there's different causes of anger. And actually, the Buddha mentioned this as well. If you look at it, it's a very brief text. He just says there's 9 causes of anger. Each of these causes is a different kind of anger. You can be angry about the past, present, or future. It's a different kind of anger. If you are angry because you are hurt, it's one type of anger. If you are angry because somebody else is hurt, that's another kind of anger. Or if you're angry because somebody's happy, this is like a sort of envy. This is also a subtle form of anger, which is actually very bad. And the anger, which is most basic, is just that you've been hurt. You might have been hurt in the past.
Well, it's kind of like reason and emotion, they cannot go along together. Sometimes envy does arise on that situation.
Right, right. It's very often like that because anger it takes over our reason, and that's why it's so difficult to come to terms with ourselves and come to understand ourselves, because it's justifying itself. That's the nature of anger. Angry because you've been hurt, that's all very recognizable for many of us. But it might also be a different kind of anger which arises in the present because you're hurting right now and you're being hurt. This can be, like they call in biology, the fight or flight response. We feel almost biologically that we have to respond to somebody's anger. This is a different kind of anger. It is very difficult to deal with if we do not have learned to still our mind in meditation. It can also be that we are angry because something might happen in the future. It has not even happened yet. This is the case often when we have conflict, in group conflict. Everyone is suspicious of the other group, and nobody has done anything to hurting at each other, but they might do it, and everyone's suspicious. And in fact, it's often based on no cause at all. But if we are angry because somebody might hurt us in the future, we're going to be very suspicious, and that in itself might cause more problems. So these are some examples. And of course, it also holds for people who are our loved ones, people who we care for a lot, because this is like something we care for a lot. And if it's hurt, it hurts us. And yeah, the worst kind of anger is when we do not even allow things to be good. Nobody is hurt, but the people who we hate, they are happy, and we don't like that at all. That's the worst kind of anger.
From what you mentioned is, well, also part of it I like to add is that anger also creates painful memory and pain, and that's
Right.
also ego as well that leading to having such anger. So these are the things that also root of the cause as well, that causing us to be angry at what's happening. Okay, how can we overcome such an anger when we know that there is a cause?
There's different ways to deal with it. It's important to recognize that when we are angry, just one person be angry, that's not the worst thing that can happen. But if the other person is responding with anger, that's when things get really bad. Or the other way around, if somebody's angry with us and we don't respond, we keep ourselves calm, then nothing will go wrong. But if we do respond, then it really goes wrong. So it's often said in emotional intelligence surveys or emotional intelligence tests, how do you respond with people who are angry? Because an emotionally intelligent person will say, well, I might be angry with them deep in my heart, but I will not act on that anger for now, because if one person's anger, that's a big problem. But if two people are angry, it's a worse problem. Now, to solve that, you need to develop the opposites. That's always how the Buddha taught. If we want to deal with a negative emotion, develop its opposite. If you can do that, it's not always possible, but if you can, then develop the opposite.
We need to try though.
Yeah, we need to try. So if you're angry, the opposite, of course, is love, loving kindness, compassion. And there also, you could also say equanimity is also its opposite.
Yeah, but equanimity need to have reason over that too.
Right. It's a matter of reason, as we discussed in the previous episode about the head and the heart. So the first thing is loving kindness. It doesn't mean that we need to always forgive and forget immediately when somebody's hurting us. That's not the way it works. It's more like a practice in general. So when somebody's hurting us, we might not be able to smile at that person or even spread loving kindness to that person because it's hurt so much. But if we are spreading loving kindness, spreading our good wishes to people in general, to the people who we love, the people who we maybe do not love but are neutral to, then it also becomes possible, if we practice often, that we also learn to smile and be kind to those who are actually angry with us or who have hurt us. The same holds for compassion. We can start with the basic steps and then develop. Everything is a practice, you know. Our mind is like a garden. If you plant the right seeds, they will grow and they will become nice flowers. Eventually, you will have trees and gardens and entire forests. But we have to start with the basics. Now, equanimity is not very well known in the West. It's a pretty well known word in Thai language, right?
No, I hardly heard that.
Yeah, so equanimity is like the sense of knowing that we cannot control everything,
Yes.
and it also is the sense that we are not responding with dislike and like, with dislike or like. So we learn that in meditation to be practicing equanimity or even mindedness. So we just allow everything to come and go, and we do not respond to our thoughts and feelings. When we do that, we learn to have some pause for thought. There will be like a space between the stimuli and the response, as they would say in biology, right? So before, when you something is happening in your life, instead of responding immediately, you have some pause, you have some room to think because of the strength of our mind.
You can take a deep breath and clear those anger out. Well, when we have such losing control because of our emotion arise and cause us anger, this is something need to be noted because emotion is quite dangerous. We need to get it under control, and thus we can keep cool and get situation under our control as well.
So if we want to keep our cool, but it's difficult sometimes, and we are not able to develop the opposites, then another thing we can keep in mind is that if all else fails, just don't pay any attention to the person or the anger which you are facing. Because if we don't pay any attention, that is sometimes the best way to be able to overcome and to be able to go to a better situation. Because in ancient times, they used to say that if you're angry, never write a letter, right? The present day, you could add to that, never write an email, and do not chat. And while you're at it, do not post anything on Facebook either.
I did that sometime. I quit that now. Got a lot of complaint though.
Oh, you did, huh?
Yeah.
It's easy to act on our anger. So the best way, if we are not able to develop an opposite to deal with our anger, to develop a good quality, then the only thing which is left to do is just to not pay attention to it and let it fade, not act on it. If we do not act on it, it will not spill over into our words, into our deeds, and we will be able to keep our calm to some extent, or at least to grind our teeth and work through it without hurting anyone anymore or hurting ourselves. So before I forget, that item is actually very important. It's a bit more difficult to explain though. In Buddhism, we believe that every deed we do comes back to us. When we are doing something good, it comes back to us as happiness. We attract happiness in our lives. When we do something wrong, it comes back to us as suffering. We attract suffering in our lives. Our mind is like a magnet that attracts things according to how it's charged. So if we do good, we attract good. If we do wrong, we attract wrong.
The law of
So,
attraction. I see.
so that's how our life works. Now, if we consider that somebody is subject to the law of karma, just like we are, then the sense of wanting to take revenge becomes much less, because the person that is doing something wrong, they will have to face the consequences anyway. This is the law of nature. This is the law of the universe. So rather than being angry at them and then, sorry, rather than being angry at them and then creating karma for ourselves, we should just understand that everyone will be subject to the consequences of his or her own actions. So rather than being angry at somebody who is probably only going to suffer anyway, then we just learn to forgive, and we understand everyone will be having his own karma in his own life because of the deeds that he has done. So when we think about it like that, we best forgive, and we not be so concerned about what other people have done and not done, and what other people should do and should not do, but rather we focus on our own actions, which are going to be our future.
That's good suggestion how to overcome the anger. But the thing is, you see, when we know how to overcome them, and we already know that the anger created from painful memory or painful experience that we experience in whatever we experience with each people. The thing is, when we feel hurt, we feel unhappy, how can we forgive and forget? It is something which need to be
Yeah.
settled, so that way people can get the general idea how can they overcome the anger, and they could prevent this not to happen in their life.
Yeah, so sometimes there's a stage, when we are hurt, and how do we prevent us from being angry in the first place, right? Because that's this is all talking about the situation in which we are already angry. But is there some way that we can learn to look at the world and live our lives in a different way, that anger just doesn't play so much of a role anymore? Well, the answer is yes, there is, but it depends on how we look at things. So the Buddha actually teaches 5 ways that we can learn to not allow anger to have so much part in our lives by looking at things more positively. So he says that if somebody does something wrong, look at their words, not their deeds. If somebody says something wrong, look at their deeds, not their words. If somebody does and says something wrong, then look at their good intentions. Maybe they have a good intention. In the Visuddhimagga, the meditation manual, it says that suppose somebody comes into the temple or in the meditation room for that matter, and they make a lot of noise, and they even start to stumble over things, or they do everything and they say everything wrong, but they have a good intention. They have come to the temple. They want to do good things at the temple, just like we. So they have a good intention, but they just mess everything up.
Just not do the
So
right way though.
right, right. So we just look at their good intention. That's the main part. But how about people who don't have a good intention at all? They don't have a good intention. They don't do anything good. It just they're just bad people or something like that. Well, remember that even the people who do the most hurtful things, they actually are also ill. These people, when they hurt other people a lot, is because they themselves they suffer from some negative emotion or unrealistic perception of life, and because of that they themselves also suffer, because there's no way that people can be happy if they don't see reality as it really is. There's no way a person can be happy if he's suffering from anger, which is the reason why we talk about this topic in the first place. So when somebody's hurting us, we also should know that they are probably hurting themselves the most, because their anger is consuming them from within. Then, if somebody's only doing good and says only good things, is just a very good person, then just just don't be angry with them, okay? They're just good people. Some people, they're very cynical, and when they see a person doing a lot of good, they get very envious and sad about that. Whereas in fact, we don't need to. Some people, they see a good person. Why are you doing that? You need. Why are you doing all these good things? Why you give to a good cause, or why are you helping the poor? What are you, Mother Teresa? What are you, the Dalai Lama, or something like that? They might say something like that. It's very envious and very jealous. Don't do that. But if you find that your envy or your jealousy is preventing you from looking at the good side of other people, then try and look at all the things that you have. There's no way, sorry, there's no way that any person only has everything better than us. There must be some things that we have better. Try not to look at only the things that we are lacking and other people have. In fact, best is not to compare at all. Don't compare yourself with others, but look at yourself as you were in the past. Compare yourself with how you were in the past, and look at how you've become better, or how you've grown. Compare yourself with the past self. That is much better than comparing yourself with others.
That's true. Well, now that you mentioned about the anger, and when the Buddha said that, mentioned that, stop yourself when people are angry at you. But how do you stop the people when they don't understand or they don't even listen to the reason in it? Or how do you stop the anger on this on this kind of situation, though?
Yes, so like I mentioned, the Buddha, he says that the best victory is when we don't respond to anger when other people are angry. He really praises that, very very high praise. He says this is the greatest victory we can have. So if you think about it that like that, it becomes a challenge to our humanity. Can we do this?
Mm,
But if somebody is very angry to us and they don't have any reason, we should understand that people who don't have any reason, they cannot be dealt with at that moment. So
mm,
sometimes this is just not the best way to do anything. The only
mm,
thing we can do is just to be still, to be quiet, and to let the situation pass. And
mm,
sometimes we can fix things by a bit of humor, by a bit of distraction, by
mm.
trying to talk or to act on some different subject.
Well,
And that is one way we can distract the situation. But it's important that we do not respond at all circumstances, do not respond to an angry person with anger.
mm. That's kind of remind me of the story that you already mentioned once in a previous episode about the Angulimala when he was angry and tried to murder the Buddha. The Buddha just said he stopped already. It is you who has not stopped. It is
Right.
something that is quite related to this what you mentioned.
Yes, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought of that actually. Yeah, so Angulimala, he actually he came to the Buddha and he was in this pattern of hurting and hurting and killing, and it
Mm,
became a sort of addiction, you could say, you know.
yeah.
And the Buddha, he simply was able to snap him out of it, to snap Angulimala out of his pattern, out of his repeated actions,
Mhm,
because he used a word got which got Angulimala to think. Yeah.
mhm. So, well, sometime maybe they will want to know too what is the benefit or what are the benefit for stopping the anger for one own cause, and how can we gain and help everyone else by stopping our own anger like this.
There's a lot that we can do for others, you know, because when we are not angry, then we not only do ourselves a great favor, but it also becomes a lot. It helps other people a lot, and
Mhm,
it should be seen as a strength, you know, when we are not angry
mm,
and we do not respond in anger. It's like a strength. It's not a weakness. And this is also important to recognize. So the Buddha, he says that he practices for the welfare of both
mm,
his own and the others. When knowing that his foe is angry, he mindfully maintains his peace. So if you learn to be peaceful and not respond by anger, this is how we save the situation for both ourselves and others. So that's why I mentioned in the previous episode already that when Lompata Machayo is asked about advice for a good love, good marriage, he always says that be angry at a different time, please. Because when you are responding to each other's anger, then there's no way it's gonna resolve anything.
mm,
So, an emotionally intelligent person, from a Buddhist perspective as well, will always simply maintain his peace
mm,
when somebody is angry, because that is not the moment we can talk.
mm.
Unless, of course, you are the Buddha and you have a sort of way to snap a person out of his anger, just
Mhm.
like the Buddha did. But that's very difficult.
That's a different level than than that. Well,
Yes.
that also remind me of our master Nan, who taught us that when sometimes people are angry, rather than saying it, our words could hurt the other person. So rather than being angry, don't have to say it. Just keep it to ourselves. It is something
Right.
that we should also put it in mind. So that way, when situation arise, when we confront such anger, it is rather to be silent.
Yes, there is one exception though. When you talked about our master nun Kunyai Ajahn, she did mention that when somebody's angry and they're quiet, they don't want to talk with us, and they're angry for have been angry for a while now. Then we, at a certain point, should start talking with them again, and then after a while, they will continue. They will be able to move on, but we should start to talk with them. And then there is also the advice of our teachers, Lompata Machayo and Lompata Tachivo. They often tell us that when we are in a conflict, the first person to apologize is often the wisest. So that is, of course, making it sound like a competition, right? But I mean that it's often very wise to solve a problem by trying to reconcile. If you take the initiative to reconcile the differences, then you are often the wisest, because that is the wisest approach.
How can we learn to forgive and forget then? Can you give a little bit lesson?
Yeah, there. So the entire thing that I mentioned, the developing the opposites, learning to not pay attention to anger, maybe even have some reflection, and looking at people in a positive way. All of that is helping us to deal with our anger better. But then you can see it like a process. Forgiving becomes gradually easier. First of all, you have anger like writing etched in the stone. That is the worst kind of anger. It's like the anger when you really are so angry with somebody, you could be angry for many lifetimes to come.
Yeah, it was
That
too
is,
deep.
of course, the worst. So sometimes this is called in the Pali language vera, or in Thai language wen. Vera is something to avoid though. Vera is when you are so angry with somebody that it becomes a multiple lifetime thing. And you actually you're keeping your anger with you multiple lifetimes. So in the next lifetime, you will meet that person again, you'll be angry with him again, and you hurt each other again. This is something that is often mentioned in Buddhist stories. So this is like this is like writing etched in a stone. It's very difficult to erase. When somebody's etching something in a stone, try to erase that. You cannot.
Cannot.
But there is a different kind of anger. As soon as we learn to soften our mind, we learn to forgive more often, we learn to let go of our anger, then you could say it becomes like writing written on earth. When you're writing something in earth, then it's possible to erase it. You can forgive it. You can forgive that kind of anger. You can let it go.
True.
But it really, people who have practiced themselves very well, the wise people, the people that we think about when we go to the temple and we meet the wise people there, that is anger like writing written in water. It's the kind of people that never really hold on to the anger. This is the sort of wise person that is very much person to emulate and to see as your example. And that is very difficult to achieve, but it's possible. Sometimes our mind may be like earth, in which we write and it takes some time to erase. Sometimes our mind may be like water, but not so often. Usually, maybe it's more like mud when you have some water and you have some earth coming together. So, when we practice more often, it becomes easier to be able to forgive and to forget.
That's quite very true and very important for the detail on this one. But also that to understand on this concept, to make ourselves be accepting, also we need to also improve our mind by practice of meditation for easier understand and letting go, forgive and forget.
Exactly. So, meditation is what makes it the most easiest to learn to forgive our anger, to let go of our anger. Because when we meditate, everything that we have aversion to, everything that we don't like, we learn to just let it be. We don't push anything out, we don't study, we don't analyze, we just let things be. because of that neutrality and then because of that equanimity and even-mindedness, we learn to develop more space in our mind, and anger just doesn't get a hold on us anymore.
Yes. Well, sometimes it is anger come because of our own emotion that arise at time. It usually come temporary, very fast, and snap just like snapping the finger, and it just go. So therefore, when it come easy and go like this, we also need to learn how to forgive and forget and letting go too. This is one thing that we can use to improve our life and stop our anger bit by bit, and eventually we will have no more anger in our mind. Well, thank you very much, Venerable Sander, for giving us
You're
such an
welcome.
idea for how to stop our anger and forgive and forget. This is a good lesson for everyone who are watching this, and they can use it to learn and improve themselves whenever they confront such emotion that cause them to have an anger. So, thank you, and we hope everyone to come see us again in our next questions. Questions, good answer. Venerable Sander, we hope to see you again in our next question. See you.
Thank you very much.